So good morning, everyone. So we have a exciting set of announcements for all of you. So Shiva's already started his screen sharing. So Shiva, over to you. So I'll be monitoring chat and making sure that any questions that are asked are answered. Thank you.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Okay. So what we okay. So the first thing that essentially I want to kind of talk about today is something that a lot of you know Andrew, and basically Andrew's been kind of been part of what we are basically doing in terms of visualizing what we should do next. And one of the things that he mentioned a couple of weeks back is essentially that as we basically move forward, EPSS scoring becomes very important for us in terms of prioritizing and basically showing up these scores in different places, etc. Because essentially the erstwhile CVSS score is not essentially helping everyone kind of create a prioritized list and how do we basically use the entire CVSS score, because there are a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that are out there, and how many will we keep patching at any point of time? So this is basically a constant question that comes up. And one of the solutions that has been proposed, and I'm saying one of the solutions is because this is one solution, but basically we are in the process of evaluating multiple other solutions to basically augment this. So one of the things is essentially what they're calling as EPSS scoring. So what EPSS score is, basically it stands for the Exploit Prediction Scoring System. And it is essentially an attempt to go beyond CVSS, which basically talked about absolutely a vulnerability and basically looking at it from a perspective of different aspects, which is can I exploit it? How easily can it be exploited? And based on that, they came up with essentially a CVSS score. So they had something which is called a base score. Then they had something which is called a temporal metric, which basically talked about what is the impact of that particular change. Third is basically what is called an exploitability score, which is can it be exploited remotely, or is it basically somebody needs to have physical access to a machine? So based on that, they came up with a composite score. However, a lot of these scores basically don't have any relevance in the real world, because if they are never exploited, then the vulnerability basically does not really kind of make sense, right? So it's there, but you may patch it, but if it never gets exploited, then you're not having as much as a risk as compared to if essentially you had something which was being actively exploited but had a lower CVSS score. So EPSS has been developed for this particular piece, and what the EPSS gives you is basically a probability of the estimated likelihood of exploitation, which is basically from 0 to 1, so or 0 to 100%. So, for example, if this vulnerability is left open, what is the probability that this particular vulnerability could be exploited? That is a number that's essentially given, and this is driven by a bunch of factors. So I actually brought this out so that all of you can essentially see what are the factors. So one is essentially the CV list that is published on Mitre. Then they basically look at all the text-based tags. Then how many days has the CV been published from? How many references are there for the CVE? And then they go into the source code of basically looking at the Metasploit, ExploitDB, GitHub, etc., to see if anybody has written basically a mechanism to exploit this vulnerability. Data from multiple security scanners, and then what are the CVSS v3 vectors that are published in the NVD? So because they pulled out the exploitability score from there, and then the ground truth. Now the ground truth is basically being pulled from multiple SIEM platforms that are existing around the world, and those essentially are aggregated and basically brought together. So based on this, you have a pretty good idea of how much a particular vulnerability really matters, and then we can close the loop. So naturally, as you would recognize, this particular piece is dynamic. It's not a static piece of data, right? Because a vulnerability which may not have an exploit yesterday may have an exploit today. Somebody might have written an exploit today and distributed it. So which means that this exploitability score is something that is dynamic and basically will be recalculated each time. So for at least for the vulnerabilities that are basically coming into play regularly, you will essentially see this come up, right? So what we've done is basically kind of brought in this entire EPSS score in a more holistic fashion, right? So now when you go into your remediation plans, whether it's a global remediation plan or the asset remediation plan, you essentially see, and this is only for pending remediations, right? It's not for what you've completed, we don't care about. But for pending remediations, we essentially give you this breakdown which says remediate within 3 days, because the EPSS score on this is basically 0.95, which means that you're basically at risk very quickly to you need to address this fairly quickly. We didn't believe that giving a deadline of 24 hours works, because I don't think, basically given the time zones and all of those pieces with different locations, doing it within 24 hours might not work. So we've basically given this thing as 3 days. If you have basically something which is 0.90 to 0.94, then essentially it is 15 days. And anything which is basically 0.85 to 0.89 is essentially 30 days. Now, apart from this, I think a lot of you would have noticed that you actually, when you go to a particular company, in case you have any vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited in the wild, there is basically a red color ticker that flows on top, which essentially tells you that you have vulnerabilities basically from which are being actively exploited. And if you click on the information over there, it actually tells you which of the assets need to be patched, and you can essentially kind of start your entire process from there. This essentially is the ticker that comes on top, comes for companies where you have a problem, and that essentially is kind of almost like you have to do it immediately, else essentially it could lead to a problem because it's being very actively exploited. So right now what we're doing within this platform is we are bringing back information saying what is the exploitability of any vulnerability that is out there, and giving you prioritization in terms of what you should be prioritizing and what you should not be prioritizing. So you can essentially see with this, you have the bucketization of the remediation plan. So now your text can essentially take anything that comes into 3 days and put them on priority, and the remaining essentially can basically wait. Now we've carried this through to all the places. So basically with if you look at your asset views, wherever it is, we've essentially kind of given you the complete EPSS scores over there. The EPSS scores are also available in the custom reports. So wherever we basically have custom reports with remediations, you essentially have the EPSS score out there, and whether pending remediations. In the asset reports, basically for any company, you will essentially see the EPSS scores being there. In the CVE scores, in the asset vulnerabilities report, all of this, all of it has been updated to basically provide you with the EPSS score, so that everywhere you go, you can actually see that this EPSS score and the ordering of the EPSS score and why you should basically act on particular thing. It essentially is giving you that complete flexibility of doing this. Not only that, in the ticketing templates, we have now basically introduced the EPSS also into the ticketing template, so that when you get the tickets in the integrated PSA, you will essentially see the EPSS score as a column as part of it. So this entire thing has essentially been integrated, and these are available with you. Also, even if you look at your detailed remediation plans, all of this essentially has the EPSS score. So all across the board, we have essentially kind of put in the EPSS score to everything that you do. So this is essentially one of the major updates, and EPSS is very important for everyone to essentially, because we understand, right? Like you have 10 things to remediate and you have 15 things to remediate. It's just not humanly possible to do all of that at the same time. So this gives us a very good mechanism to basically prioritize what is important and basically kind of deprioritize things which may never get exploited. And this is something that you can explain to the customer. And we will basically give additional information in the reports in the coming weeks, where we will explain the EPSS scores and why basically your risk is much lower, even though basically you have, say, you may have basically 20,000 vulnerabilities, right? But as long as you fix the top 100, which basically are currently being exploited, your risk score basically dramatically falls down. And this is how the new risk score is going to be calculated. And that is what we essentially are bringing into this platform. So a more focused approach in terms of saying what is really like, instead of basically giving a scare tactic of saying that, man, you have 20,000 vulnerabilities or 2,000 vulnerabilities, and the numbers don't make any sense because people are just like, okay, what do I do? And you really cannot do much. It's basically you have to just keep applying patches. In certain cases, you can't apply patches. Even in cases of, for example, .NET upgrades, right? Now, .NET upgrades, are they really being exploited in the wild? The answer is no. But basically, these are all have a CVSS scores of 9.8. So basically, they seem to come up on top. But with the EPSS score coming in, all the .NET upgrades will actually move into, you can remediate it at your time. But essentially, these are the key things that you have to remediate immediately. The second thing that we are actually bringing, and we are basically working actively on this, is to do the same kind of prioritization for network scan findings. And you will see those pieces also basically coming into play very shortly, probably within the next couple of weeks. But this EPSS effort, since we heard about it and we thought it will be useful, our engineering team actually basically doubled down. And I thank my team for basically doubling down. They really did a good job of putting this together because we had to plumb it through the entire application. And we were able to kind of get this out to you. So use this feature, look at it, and then give us feedback in terms of anything that we are missing or anything that is not correct, etc. We are happy to basically make those changes that you need, as always. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is basically another feature which basically we recently introduced based on some partner requests, which is in case basically, for example, there is a machine that has been compromised or whatever it is. And in case of certain partners, the logs, ideally, basically, everybody should say that we have a SIM and we have all the logs in the SIM. That's perfectly fine. In some cases, because the customer is unable to pay or the partner is not large enough, you don't have a SIM, then the ability to essentially fetch event logs from the machines directly where things are not working well or things are being compromised essentially is available here, so that you can essentially use that. And it basically you can basically choose the from and to date, and it will essentially pull all the event logs. And basically, you can download the event logs. These are being stored, so you can essentially download it. And when you download it, you essentially get the complete details of it. So the ability to essentially remotely pull the event logs and basically kind of pull it together is something that we've this thing. The next one is that one of the constant things, and Andrew Vatasco pointed this out on the Slack channel last week, and a lot of you talked about it, which is essentially agents update and sometimes don't basically kind of come up, and we need to know about these conditions. And basically, we also are very interested in those conditions. So there is essentially the ability for all of us to essentially look at the agent update information from each agent if it does not come up. And when you click on that agent update information, it has the complete logs of that agent upgrade. And this will basically help us going forward to essentially see if there are any upgrades failing because of any reasons. The only things that we've essentially seen that where this fails is if essentially some EDR or antivirus essentially comes in and kind of terminates the executable halfway through, and then it is unable to restart. That's the case that we have this thing. So, but we have basically put this in so that we can essentially get good telemetry on this. And in case there is any issue, we can essentially fix out those issues. The next one was basically there was a request for asset serial numbers being made available in all of the asset reports. So the folks have essentially put in the asset serial numbers everywhere. So including, so this is this. Now, the next thing that we are essentially doing is that if you remember, like we essentially did the Cyber Essentials assessment. So we have basically, we are going to be releasing later this week or early next week, the ability for you to do a PCI DSS assessment from this platform. And again, it has the same concept of a default template. You can essentially create as many assessments as you want on a per company basis. And then in the template, you can essentially kind of provide your answers. One of the things that I want to just point out which was added as part of this entire piece, even in the older Cyber Essentials, was the ability to upload your own custom evidence, which means that, for example, if you have a company and you have to upload the incorporation documents as part of the audit, then you can essentially click on this upload evidence and upload that evidence. And in the end, when you get the assessment corresponding to this question, you will essentially see that evidence also being downloaded. So that way, your auditor gets a full view of the entire piece instead of you having to basically pull documents from multiple places. And the beauty of this is that if you have uploaded some of these documents as part of the template, then essentially each time you generate an assessment, automatically these documents get attached. And so you don't have to basically repeat this process over and over again. So we have the complete PCI DSS assessment. So you can essentially see that all of the sections, including payment application and description of environment, what are the third-party service providers. So in fact, here we had a little bit of complexity. We needed things like tables, etc. So our team was essentially able to put tables into the system. And then you can basically kind of, and it will basically auto answer questions that it can automatically determine. So that's the entire value of the platform, right? If we can determine a certain set of requirements are met, all those answers will be auto-populated. You have to populate only answers that we essentially do not know. And we are basically building a matrix which says what are the answers that we populate in each of the assessments and versus what are the answers we are not able to populate. So, so that basically it is clear to everyone. And once you've complete the assessment, you can essentially kind of click on this view download button and you basically get everything. The second assessment that the team is working on right now, again to be released next week, is basically CIS Microsoft Office 365. So this allows you to kind of do a complete assessment of Office 365, just pure Office 365. This basically will require data from Intune. So there are certain changes in the application that you will need to make, but it essentially can pull up data from Intune and basically provide complete assessment details. So that is essentially kind of, it looks at all of the Office 365 settings plus your machine settings and basically your client settings, and basically combines all the three of them and then basically does the CIS Office 365 assessment. So this is essentially what the team has been working on. So you can see that it basically has all of the pieces, which essentially says use of administrative privileges, basically limitation of administrative privileges, secure configuration of hardware and software, audit logs, email and web browser protections, malware defense, limitation and control of network ports, secure configurations, boundary defense. All this in the context of Office 365. Now, again, Office 365, you can get a lot of this from the settings inside of Office 365, but there are a whole bunch of things which relate to the clients. So again, since we are on the clients, we're able to pull that data and basically put this together in the assessment, right? And so that is the second thing. Again, basically with simplifying notifications, basically with CyberSync emails, you can, SES email, you can essentially create alert rules within SES and basically kind of create multiple roles, and you can essentially kind of set up notifications out there. So this again is something that a partner art. And then basically we have lightweight agents, which basically in case they go down, we have two events, which is probe went down and server agent went down. So this basically was added a few weeks back, and I'm just reiterating because these events basically can basically kind of help you get notified. And then there are basically remediations for critical and high severity that we've essentially added. So you can essentially kind of check this. So only remediations with critical and high severity will essentially be pushed into the tickets. So these essentially are the updates that we've been working on for the past week. So what we'll do now is that I'll open chat and basically go through any of the questions that you may have so that we can this thing. Sean, any idea when the attaching of configs with the same name will be fixed? It's under testing, Sean. There are 3 or 4 bugs which still basically have not been fixed. So we are basically awaiting those to be fixed. I'm hoping that by the end of this week, we'll basically get on top of this. Can you toggle on and off the EPSS filter? This is a good feature. We can basically provide that. We can basically provide that, Mark. We can toggle on and off the EPS filter. I did use the bar for Outlook on Butty. I would like to have an overview of these to see which customers have the red bar. Okay. So basically, you would like to see, so basically what we'll do is in the global view, we will basically provide a kind of a quick view where you can essentially see all the customers and basically any customers with which have the red bar. So I will basically work on that. Will you be able to schedule the fetching or downloading of event log files? Would some need to keep compliance but don't have a full sync? Chris, the answer is yes. Technically, yes, we can do it. Nobody asked us for it, but now that you ask us for it, yes, I think we can basically schedule the fetching and downloading of the event logs. For the fetch event logs, I assume that it's available for assets with lightweight agent installed. Yes, it is right now available for assets with lightweight agent installed, but we basically are extending it for the probe by next week because we have the ability to pull it from the probe too. Can it look up warranty info for the assets? Unfortunately, we have not delved into this, but this seems to be a little bit of a complicated topic. And if any of you have ideas in terms of how we can do it, we're happy to do it. The biggest problem that we see is that, like, for example, with HP, Dell, etc., these are some contract IDs that are basically mapped into some locations elsewhere, and basically it requires some sort of association with the OEM vendors in order to be able to get this information. But if you folks know how to basically get this, we are happy to basically bring this. Chris, thank you. Own evidence with salvation. Okay, thanks, Chris. So we will basically provide this. We have this upload button. The red bar blocks your ability to properly navigate the UI. Okay, and once acknowledged to comes back. Okay, so Todd, what we will do is that I will we will look at basically how we can make it more aesthetic. The reason basically the red bar is sitting there is because it is a serious problem. So we're kind of trying to draw your attention towards it. We'll give you the ability to essentially kind of switch it off and say that don't show it again. So that way you can choose not to show it on again. The reason why when you say acknowledge and you come back, it basically shows up again is because you may have basically, I think it has to be user level context. We have to give a user level context to it because one technician may have come and basically suppressed it, but when you come in, you're a different technician. When you come in and navigate the company, you should see it. So I think we need to just probably maintain state as on a per user basis, and then kind of say that if you have acknowledged it, then we won't show it again, but others will get it from your company. Can we have an alert for jobs failing? We have times when agent is still running, but jobs are failing for some reason. Yep, we can basically create a notification for failing jobs. That's not a problem. So, are there plans for more assessment like CIS for Windows, HIPAA, NIST, CSF? Yes, Perley, we are going to be, as you're seeing, like we're pretty much putting on a cadence, like every week or 2 weeks, we'll essentially get 2 of these compliances into this place. Simon, is there an ETA to push lightweight agents from the probe? It will be useful for clients who don't have RMM platform to push out agents. Simon, this basically is being implemented as part of the new agent that we are releasing for the new UI. So as part of the new UI and that refresh, essentially this will be available. Connect Secure Vulnerability Scanner to become a PCI ASP. So this we've kind of done this. The problem is that when we go for the certification, they essentially say that they do not certify a vendor. They only certify an organization that does the assessment, right? So we are not able to get certification as a vendor. The reason that Qualys, etc., basically claim that they are ASVs is because they have professional services teams that provide this information. So the only way to do this is essentially if we start doing the assessments and we have a professional services team and we basically say that we're using this tool, that's when we can essentially get certified. That's the issue. When is the new UI due out? It's basically in progress. I tentatively believe that by end of this month we should be there, but we will basically kind of get back with concrete dates very shortly. Is there documentation on how to configure 365? Yes, as part of the CIS assessment, you will get documentation on how to make it compliant. So there is basically help in that. So I think I'm covered on all the questions.
I think there's just one from Mitch on, will we have reports that are centered around EPSS?
Yes, we will. But basically, I think that will be towards the end of the month, and probably with the new UI, that's where I'll put all these new reports in there. So excellent. So if there are no more questions, I hope, and by the way, all APIs are also updated where you can actually get the EPSS scores. So essentially, if you're using this as an API and basically doing something outside, then you get access to this data from there too. So as we always say, no cheating. So it's always like any data that's available with us will be available with the API.
Quick last couple of questions. Chris again has a question. Is there any multi-tenant functionality in plans? Chris, can I request you to come up and state, because the product is already multi-tenant. So I'm like to understand better if you don't mind.
If you can hear me okay, because I'm just over in France at the moment, so my signal isn't a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So it is, and maybe I just don't have that, and maybe I just don't have that functionality within my portal at the moment. Then, but it's so I work with a few clients who need to access multiple companies, and it'd be useful if I can set them up once and then they get access to all the companies under their sort of master profile. So I don't know whether that's just the way that I'm set up or whether.
Yeah,
so that's essentially the way we work.
So you can actually set up a user and you can have access to a subset of your companies, all the companies, or basically only a single company. So that's already.
Yeah. Yes. So I can see that I can add them into multiple companies. However, it'd be useful if I can set them up as then like a subtenant and so they can then add their own companies in and add their own agents. And so if they've got multiple sites and stuff, they can add separate kind of they can add separate companies or then sort of separate sites in there. So then they can sort of segregate them that way.
Oh,
rather
so
than me
basically-
setting up a separate company and then sort of add them into it again.
Okay, so you're basically saying that when you're adding a client, you want basically the client himself to be able to add multiple companies and multiple sites under that. That's what
Correct.
you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the same situation. We have a client that basically takes over several companies, kind of pulls them in, but they still want to monitor them separately. And right now we've just got almost 10 different customers in CyberCNS, one for each locations. But if we could group them into, one company and then several sites, that would be helpful.
Got it. So I think that is doable. I will basically work on this and basically get back to you, but I will basically deliver this as part of the new UI functionality that we are doing. I don't want to make too many changes on the current UI, but in the new UI functionality, we'll be able to do it and basically give you the ability to provide this.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, so your point is taken, Tim. We could maybe have a group as an organization structure and then have organizations mapped to that. Yeah, we can certainly consider that. Like Shiva said, we will look at it at the new UI launch timeframe. Anything else? We seem to be fully caught up. All right, if nothing else, Shiva, any closing thoughts, and then we can catch up with the long weekend. So yeah, we can catch up certainly next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for all your support, and basically just try out the new features. Let us know if anything is not working for you or anything basically seems amiss. And if you need any additional reports, etc., please basically get back to us. We are happy to basically get this going. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys.